It is about 6 o'clock. I will now call to order the January 25th, 2016 meeting of the Easthampton Conservation Commission. The meeting is being recorded. Are there any public concerns, non-agenda items? Okay, moving right along to a continuation of the notice of intent, public hearing for a notice of intent filed by the Williston School for the construction of cross-country running trail improvements, a new bridged stream crossing of White Brook, and 4 replacement wetland/stream crossings behind Galbraith Field off Taft Avenue.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
For the record, my name is Mark Reed from Heritage Surveys. Jeff Tannett is here tonight, and Bill Cannon. I would like to submit 2 packages of revised plans and cover letter to the commission that I had emailed you all. Basically, at the last public hearing, we had discussed making response comments to DEP. And so that's what this packet of information is outlining.
I printed a copy, but I can
Pass that along.
Thank you.
So the cover letter outlines performance standards for work being proposed in the BVW and within the replacement area for the project in itself, and outlines the standards relative excuse me, to that we are replicating replicating 1,917 square feet on the parcel of land which is now owned by Williston at 196 Park Street. 198 Park Street. So I had forwarded a copy of the deed.
Yes, thank you.
So that the Williston now owns that piece of property for that. That kind of clears up one portion of it, that they do own it and have the rights to propose what they're doing. Within that. And then the second comment that Mark Stenson had from DEP was relative to the, he was looking for additional information and detailing the narrative for BVW replacement, closely following the Massachusetts Inland Wetlands Replication Guidance document. So we've gone through that document, provided a response to that, and have part of this attachment as the wetland replication sequence and production or procedures and sequence of work outlined, which is not only written on the plans being here, but within the documents that I provided to you, at 8.5 by 11 for that. We've tried to also, within this revised L14, provided you with everything that is needed relative to the replication, being narrative notes and specifications relative to bordering vegetative wetland replacement narrative, the wetland replacement specifications, the vegetative cover and details for that area. And then we try to, within the email, provide you with a little bit, or to help him along with our alternatives analysis, provide you with a plan that kind of shows at the wetland crossing, as you come down the hill just before you get to the brook, to show what is already pathway, what is not, what is being restored, and to try to get some better clarification for his aspect of it. We did not take into account the existing pathways within the work area, proposed work area, to reduce the amount of wetland replication. What we did was we took the entire, because it's it's only less than 2,000 square feet of wetland replication. We took the entire footprint and called it all replication. As somebody said in my office, when we were out at the site, we were standing at the bottom of that slope, and she said, we weren't standing in wetlands, because you don't notice it. It's it's all, but under the act, it is considered wetlands at the bottom of that slope. So that's within that part of it. Also provided you copies of the GZA report and the wetlands assessment report that went along with this entire piece of property. So to provide that, so it's all in one handy place, along with the pictures that were done by GZA. So, Yanitsky. And then in our review of the guidance for replication, flipping ahead here. Oops, I forgot one page. Were some data sheets for inspection after it's constructed for 2 years, and they go along with the construction notes within itself.
Is that what you're saying? You forgot some sheets?
Yes.
Okay.
You're right.
That's okay.
So no, it's in here.
Oh, it's in there.
within
Okay.
the email
Okay.
information. It's Appendix 4, which is the example monitoring data sheets, which is in here. The page I forgot, I skipped over, was we did this plan trying to give you a relationship and to give Mark Stenson a relationship to where the work area BVW disturbance is located here, and the 198 wetland restoration area here, to show that we're all in the same watershed. It all flows to White Brook and flows in a northerly direction, so to give him some guidance. He was out of the office yesterday, and I didn't hear from him today, so.
Thank you for following up on these questions.
And lastly, after we get talking about that, we had started talking about the request for a waiver from the stormwater bylaw, the local bylaw. And we just need to close that loop. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, go ahead.
No, you can.
I forgot the language off the top of my head, but I looked at it before the last meeting, and it seemed like it was, pretty good case for a waiver.
Okay.
Yep.
Does anyone have any concerns with that? Or with the stormwater waiver? Okay. So, with regard to the more detailed submittals, and in light of the fact that there's now ownership of the property where the performance standards compliance is proposed, which is great. Ashley, can you just note the book and page of the deed to the top? Thank you. So, are there any further questions?
There was some discussion last meeting about the footings for the big bridge.
Mm-hmm.
There's some changes you were going to make to that. I don't know if that was
That
redesigned.
will
Still in the
happen in the future,
Okay.
not right away. We feel that the footings are sized adequately, but we need to confirm that.
Okay.
So that's going an ongoing process. If there's any change to the size of them, if they get larger, for instance, we would come back and
Okay.
let you guys know of that.
And then, I guess one of the other questions was, the groundwater table. Maybe what we should do is pull the Park Street file.
Well, the only data sheet that
For D is this one?
right. Unfortunately,
You wanna do it?
Dan did not do one. He did it 5 feet from D8, I believe.
Okay. But there's
to
no.
show that this is the beginning of the resource area, to
Mhm.
show that this didn't continue up.
Sure. I guess I'm just wondering about soil profile. That's all. And that's why I wanted to see if we pulled the file, if there's, with other data forms.
Yes,
there's-
there are for the other resource areas
Mhm.
on the site itself. And yes, in that file there are, not for the D series, unfortunately.
Mhm.
This is the only one he had for the D series that I could see.
Yeah, 198. Just so we can see the rest of the information.
Sure.
For that, that general area, it's not gonna be dramatically different. This is the one question. Like that one. So Ashley, can you note the response to the EP comments
Mm-hmm.
dated January 22nd, 2016?
27.
Second, 2 of 2.
Mhm.
And also note, when you're ready. Revised wetland replication plan sheet, capital L-14.0. Revision date in parentheses 1/22/2016. So I'm looking for the, let me see if it was
Right, we had submitted.
provided after the fact.
No,
Because the original PDF that he sent was,
correct.
needed revisions, or needed,
Some data sheets, and so
Yeah.
we've sent those along, and it should be in there.
that's,
There's B. 11's under uploads. Oh, yeah, so it's a big
that was D. Oh, that was the upload.
That was B. 11. There we go. Here's upload.
Okay.
So there's a 58.
That one that said upland said D8 on it as well.
Yeah, we're trying to find a wetland one now.
Oh, for D8.
Well, what is the D8 for
Is
soil?
that
So-
For plant? That's what I want. So it doesn't have any, it went to 20 inches, okay. And this was- Can you use it there? Use it back.
So where's,
Yeah,
help me
so-
here, where's the F relative to the D?
Let me
Or
grab
the
the other
C.
plan.
Or the B?
Yeah, sure. Yep, let me grab this other plan.
Okay,
It shows for the entire site.
that's.
That's the one. Okay, so, this is D,
Mhm.
this is C, reading, no, I'm sorry, E, we're reading upside down.
Is there enough?
So we have D, F, you looking
Where's
for
that?
F? F is, along the
Okay. Stream?
intermittent stream, F is
Okay.
there.
Where's F for redox? So, redox could be as high as 5 inches at a,
Just consider it a completed Bolenberg surface.
So one thing we did do is specify that 12 inches of the existing soil on
Mhm.
either side be removed and replaced with, 1/3 topsoil, 1/3 peat, one
Mhm.
sand, to make sure that we had some good
Mhm.
soils, and hydraulic soils
Mhm.
to support the the replication area.
Right back to you. So I think the one thing that I would want to include as a condition relative to the replication area is that the depth to redox
Mhm.
features in the D-series wetland adjacent to the proposed replication areas be confirmed prior to excavation.
Sure.
That way, if there needs to be an adjustment made, it can be made.
Right, if we need to go deeper with the soils, we can do that.
Yep. I just don't want it to be high and dry
Correct.
at the end of the day.
Correct. Looking at the
Which is
topography.
one stuff.
Well, and then that too.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the topography, it's all.
Right, it's all
concrete,
gonna
it's all shed through here, so, but yes, we can do that, we can do a hole on either side and confirm that. And if we need to, go deeper, we can definitely go deeper.
Maybe we'll do it right the first time.
Right.
To get everything growing.
Yeah.
Okay. Just writing this down for myself. Are there any other questions, comments, discussions? So, in addition to, you're somewhat familiar with our typical conditions, and I made notes at the previous meeting. So, in addition to confirming depth to seasonal high ground water table and redox features, we talked about refreshing the wetland flagging at crossings.
Yes.
Per the plans, staking out the alignment prior to construction. Obviously, no fill in the stream. General sequence of construction.
Do we agree that the mitigation area is going to be staked out of some sort?
And we talked about reflagging. We talked about making sure that the D-series wetland flagging is intact, and then that the limits of the replication areas be staked in the field as well.
Correct. So what we're
so that we can differentiate when stuff grows.
Right. So this plan indicates that we're going to put reinforcement rods that are going to be below grade by 3 feet and above by 4 feet at each one of the existing flag numbers, so you can see where the original delineation was done. And the plan calls for the replication area going, for instance, from D9 to D11 in a straight line, and D2 to D6. So that we can definitely see in the future, that's where it was, the wetlands were, that's where replication was. And
that
also
way it
act
won't
as a
get
guidance. Correct, they won't get mowed also
Right.
through there, so that's part of the plan that I forgot to mention.
Yes, thank you. So, and then there'll be the typical ones about weekly, active reporting, reporting during construction activities and
Right.
site stabilization and.
Right. One thing we want to ask about is relative to monitoring reports and so forth. The Williston is going to be hiring a licensed contractor to do the installation of the crossing, the bridge and concrete work and so forth. So that's not a problem because that's going to go relatively quick, because he's going to want to get in there and get out and send him a bill. The rest of the trail system may move slower because they're going to do that from their in-house people. So, I may have to let you know that, things aren't moving along, so this week and next week, or, because of their schedule of keeping everything else running, right, Jeff?
Right.
Okay.
So we just, wanted to let you guys know that that's,
So I would be fine with when there's work in resource areas, the typical report where it's more detailed. But if there's no work or no work in resource area or buffer zone, just an email saying no work.
Okay.
I'm fine with that if everyone else is. And that way we don't need 2 pages of
Correct.
not applicable,
Sure.
or someone's time spent doing it
Mhm.
as well. It's more like it's just helpful because we can't be everywhere.
Correct.
So,
Yeah, I guess I'd just add, as long as things are stable, you know.
right.
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 Yes.
Just,
Well,
Not doing
luckily,
any work, but it's all washing into the
Right,
stream.
exactly.
I mean, luckily the pathway is just putting the log sides and wood chips down, so there's really not anything that's earth moving.
Yeah.
Definitely the,
Minimum disturbance.
and definitely the
Yeah.
crossing
Yeah.
will be, Virgilio Construction out of Westfield is going to be doing the work. And they'll be going in there with their equipment and in and out in a timely fashion, so.
Yeah, and the only other real disturbance would be the helical piles.
Right.
And again, that would be a contractor coming in, and getting that done. And certainly, I guess, my understanding of that is that disturbance should be, it's not like there's gonna be an area that's disturbed and left. The pile will be put in, I would hope with no disturbance.
That's supposed to be the
Yeah.
big
Right.
selling point,
Those
right?
are the
Right.
people
That
that
they're
we
the
will
least.
try to hire, that's, yeah, so, and then basically then the wood bridge would just be set on top of that.
Yeah. There's a little bit of excavation here and there for the gabion baskets down the chute and everything.
Yeah,
right?
that would all be done
Yeah,
by
those would be
the site contractor
Site
that does the
contractor.
bridge.
Right.
Yeah, oh,
Yeah,
okay.
It's all part of
Yeah,
the bridge.
so
Every part of
basically,
the bridge,
yeah,
yeah.
going down, putting the bridge up, and then getting up the chute on the other side would all
Okay.
be done by the contractor,
Okay.
so.
So
So,
the
yeah,
That'll
contractors
all
come
happen.
after to
Those are the tricky
do the
parts.
Yeah,
gating
in and out
baskets,
quickly,
the bridge, the grading of the road down.
Correct.
yeah,
So,
Correct.
Yeah.
so
yeah,
the significant
yeah. And then
earth
removal of
removal,
whatever.
earthwork
Right,
and construction to be performed by, and then you guys will do the trails.
right.
They'll do the wetland crossing too.
The contractor will do the wetlands crossing, correct.
Replication.
Yep,
Helical pier, yes.
yes, and the,
Piers.
yeah, and the wetland replication also will be done by the contractor.
Okay.
That's something that,
Yeah, and is there a certain timetable that one has to follow after the other? I mean, I'm not anticipating there's any reason there should be a significant delay, but,
No, I would say the sooner that you could construct the wetland replication area, the better. And there'll be a time contingency, contingent on the requesting a certificate of compliance,
correct.
or a partial certificate of compliance
Right.
following
mean-
completion of work versus success of the replication area.
Yeah,
If
that
the
might
weather-
be something that, excuse me,
Yeah.
there might be something that, depending on the season, when the contractor gets in there to do the bridge work and everything else, to be done first to allow the growing season to
Right.
take, you know, so that the replication area can take advantage of the growing season,
Sure.
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Because-
potentially. we
So
could do
I don't know when
replication
that will
area
take place,
before the
but
other
that
project.
judgment will be made at the time of contracts,
Right.
Yeah.
you know,
Sure.
released for the work.
Yeah.
I mean, the best time is either spring or fall, because in the
Right.
growing season, you know,
Right.
you don't wanna do it in the middle of July or August, because the seed won't germinate, and, because that's the, so.
Yeah,
But there's nothing that says you can't do it first or early.
right.
Right.
For sure. As long as it's done. So, do you have all, thank you.
I think so.
All right, so we need to do Wetlands Protection Act first, then stormwater.
Okay.
Is that,
I was gonna do stormwater first, but.
we can do stormwater first if you want. If you wanna make that motion.
All right, so I'll move to waive the requirement for a permit under the Easthampton stormwater ordinance.
The requirement?
Waive the requirement for a stormwater permit under the Easthampton stormwater ordinance.
And I'll second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
Aye.
No, I'm just waiting. Okay, and would anyone care to make a motion to close the public hearing and issue any other conditions?
I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing and approve the notice of intent for the construction of the cross-country trail with the standard terms and conditions, 48-hour notice prior to the activity. Any other little You have a ton of things written down.
Should read them
Second
all.
for me now? Or later? Later.
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor? Aye. So moved. We will have that for you
That's
at our
when-
next meeting. We'll probably have that for you signed at our next meeting, which is February 8th.
Okay. All right, thank you very
Very
much.
good.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Thank you all, and thank you for providing the deed.
Yes.
All done. Thanks.
Jessica, do you have, oh, whoops. I need a copy of
Thank you.
Thank you, have a good night.
See you later.
Thank you, Jeff. Oh, wait, Jeff, don't go. You gave me something. Oh, no, no. I don't know. Okay, Blue, hold on.
You're turning to me, Melissa.
I had everything organized and ready to do. Did I give you the determination that we'll get back?
Well, that was my copy.
And you gave it to me? Oh,
Yes,
boy.
but I'll,
Do you have another
I'll
copy?
give, I can give it to you, I could,
Well, no, what I
I
want to
just printed it
do.
out from an email, so I can reprint it tomorrow, so that's no
Well,
problem.
no, what I want to do. That's not it. Seriously, does anyone have a copy of a determination? That, yeah,
Yeah,
that. I want to look at the dates. September 22nd, 2014. For the minutes, since we failed to check a box.
Not that.
Hmm?
Not that.
Whoa. That's the yes, that. I'm getting there.
Which project was that, 2014?
That was the rail trail committee.
yeah,
For cutting along the road.
yeah.
So-
Locust tree cutting.
Right.
And it happened, right?
No, they just
Negative?
said last week.
Okay, so I'm gonna go make a copy of the
Yep.
minutes that talk about a negative determination.
Yeah, okay.
You right
Yeah,
back.
yeah, my only concern was if there were any conditions that we needed to, I assumed that it was negative determination, but that was,
48-hour notification.
right, which we did, so,
Yes.
yes.
But we didn't actually mark the right box.
No, for some reason, there was no boxes checked anywhere. Or maybe I'm not supposed to show you that, so that's,
No, it's good. We're still learning. Always room for improvement.
I just got a permit from the Army Corps of Engineers last week where they forgot to check a box. They were,
yeah.
it was like, major dredge or fill project, navigational channel project, or there was one other category. They did not check one. It's like,
Yeah.
so
we also-
we were making fun of them pretty bad,
Check
so I
box,
guess
though.
maybe I should.
And for those who
You were
wait
saying.
a long time, right?
Yeah,
And that was,
And
that-
we're
that
I know
was-
when we did the pond dredging, that was a process.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, the permitting for the dredging cost more than the dredging.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Must have missed this one.
Yeah, those aren't easy projects, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so. Oh, is that? Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you
Yep,
for
good night.
bringing that to our attention.
Yep,
Get put in that
no
file.
problem. Okay, have a good night.
Jeff.
See you later.
Thank you. Whoops. So Ashley, can you just note in the minutes that we, due to a clerical error under general business?
Under general business.
Yeah.
That was my question.
Yeah.
Due to a clerical error.
Due to a clerical error.
I was just telling Jeff our Army Corps story.
Which one?
They forget to check the box.
I think paid to do that.
I know, it's true. That's very true.
Due to a clerical error.
Due to a clerical error, the commission.
They probably had lawyers look at that thing.
The commission failed to indicate their determination regarding rail trail maintenance on September 22nd, 2014.
Hold on,
I was
determination.
wondering about that, actually. Is that,
We just provided a copy of the minutes for him to attach that.
Say, see we.
because I noticed nothing was checked.
Yeah,
I just was like, okay, this must be it.
I,
I know.
I was like, moving on. There we go.
What do I know?
Looks good.
Regarding what? Regarding the determination.
Issue.
No, I wasn't. Greater.
Something. with
Rail
the-
trail maintenance on September 22nd, 2014.
So we provided.
The commission provided a copy of the September 22nd, 2014 meeting minutes
Same date, right?
of same date,
Okay.
indicating the decision to issue a negative determination of applicability, number 3.
We take good minutes.
Number 3.
With the only condition of something, subject to 48-hour notification. And then this is a copy that we can attach to their file.
Can you just check the box and check the box?
Who is the right box checked, yeah. Or no, just the minutes. Nothing? Okay, thank you.
We're moving right backwards. I know. I'll fix it later.
I'm just worried that I'll have to prove it and I won't look at it.
Okay, so we have no other hearings or meetings, no request for certificates of compliance, no emergency certifications. Regarding enforcement orders, we, at our previous meeting, regarding 37 South Street, Mr. Gall, at our previous meeting, indicated that he had moved,
Yes, but I don't think they're moved.
but they don't appear to have been moved, so could
Were they
you
supposed
be
to,
available to follow up on
Yes,
that?
I will follow up on it.
were they supposed to be moved closer to the bike path?
No.
Moved completely.
Well,
Out
out
of,
over towards where these trees were. But he knows where they're supposed to be, but it's out of riverfront area, so.
as long as they're out of riverfront area, we can't say a thing until they affect riverfront area.
Because
So
it
if-
looked to me like they've been moved closer to the bike path, which is further from the riverfront.
But
I
there's
don't know
still,
what the
there's
buffer
still
zone is.
a pile close to the driveway that hasn't moved. There's a newer one closer to, a new pile closer to the bike path, but it's still in riverfront, technically.
Yes.
Alright.
So, thank you. Commissioner Ryan will follow up with at 37 South Street. Regarding property owned by Mr. Gall, Mr. Bernard Gall, off Groveland Street. I did not have a chance to talk to DEP. There is, to my understanding, there is no exemption that would cover excavating a sump in a stream. So I will have by our next meeting an enforcement order prepared to send to Mr. Gall.
Just chuckling because I'm delirious.
I think it's the scarlet fever.
Probably, yes.
All right.
There's no what? Waiver.
Exemption.
Thank you.
So,
Is-
I will work to craft that unless someone else wants to. I've never
I
done
don't
it.
know. So.
I mean, I can work on it.
So, we'll have to fight over it.
Is it hard to figure out?
I had no idea.
It's detail oriented. It's very, we need to be very specific. We can use our previous enforcement order as a model, but DEP offered to review that one and did review that one, and so we would be coordinating with DEP.
I think one was the time.
We do have your memo with the observations.
We do
Yeah.
have that. So,
Should I say something about DEP review? Or
we
form?
intend to have DEP review and comment on the draft enforcement order, which will be referenced as, ready? Capital EO, capital E, capital O, dash 2016 dash 001.
New year.
New year.
New business.
First one. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So, who do you want to try?
So do I have to talk to DEP
Yep.
first?
No.
While
You can
helping?
do it either way. You can talk to Mark Stinson. You could talk to Dave Fowlis. You could talk to Dave Cameron. Let's get
Just
Tim
all of the
McKenna.
above. I could try it.
It's not too bad. I
It's
mean,
not.
You could have put Melissa or Dan look at it first and then talk to.
If you want to, I can.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll send you
I will
the.
send you
The old one.
the old one,
Okay.
and you can draft, and then turn it around, and we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
By
Do it.
Monday? You could do that before next
By
Monday?
tomorrow.
Thanks, Elliot.
8 a.m. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Well, that's
I
how
can
that. I'm sorry, I can't do that anymore.
Yeah, I'll do it. 4 months is good.
Okay. So, we received a SWIP update on the Pleasant Street Mills revitalization project dated January 14th, 2016.
Sorry, on which project?
Pleasant Street Mills.
I'm going out of order.
You can't do that.
Yes, I can.
You're out of order.
I just did.
Okay, so now on which one?
Where's the gavel?
Pleasant Street Mills. Okay. Oh, right, because, yeah, okay.
C.
See?
I wish you'd asked Mark before you left. Okay. And everything is fine.
It was closed on Sunday. Was it
The trail's closed.
For how long?
For a while.
The trail is closed.
Just pretend there's 2 feet of snow on it.
So,
So we received a
we received a SWIP, SWPPP, all caps,
PPP.
Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan,
Perfect.
practically.
Period. We received
Please.
a SWIP.
How many P's are we up to now?
January 14th.
Proper prior planning prevents poor performance.
2016.
Okay. We have not received updates on anything else, other than confirmation that there's no further construction occurring at Mutter Field
Yeah, nothing's happening there.
until spring, or until they notify us. So everything else is a,
Great, no comment. No update.
yes.
Okay, so with Mutter Field, no more work
There's
expected
been no
this winter.
activity.
Yeah,
since
they sent an email, their
Okay.
landscaper sent an email saying
everything's
they're not
frozen.
doing any more work.
Yeah, everything's frozen.
Yeah.
Um,
And we still had a question about Paul Street, and we didn't ask Mark Reed before he left. So, email Mark Reed?
Sure.
about Paul Street.
Yeah.
We had a
That's just what the update status is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
Update status.
Status update status.
month. So it says monthly report's not due until the end of January. Did we get a monthly report?
Oh.
No.
I thought we were supposed to get
Bi-weekly.
weekly.
Yeah. So okay.
We haven't received a report since prior to our previous meeting.
No reports received. What are we waiting to hear from? What were you wishing we had asked, Mr. Reed?
About that.
Oh, where the reports are.
Mhm.
Noted. Okay.
Got it.
No update, no update, no update.
Okay. So, general business. Draft wetlands protection ordinance regulations.
Oh. So, upon review of that massive document, there are many questions that I have for the commission.
Okay.
They're more like just the fill-in numbers, whether or not we want buffer zones, those sorts of things.
Okay.
Specifically fees. I'm just gonna go through my little checklist of stuff right here. Give me any background info, let me know.
Should I take detailed minutes as she talks? Wetlands ordinance drafting, right?
Yeah. Okay, so the fees. There was one mentioned in the old one. I saw you guys reviewed it in like 2011. I think that's when it was sent
I
around.
think that's about one of those come up.
Yeah, there was some edits.
Okay.
I think we needed some. Yeah, so the NOI and the RDA were question marked as how much we want to have for the fees.
Oh, perfect timing, Jess.
Yeah.
So we're going over Colleen's recapping the draft wetlands protection ordinance, and having gone through the most recent iteration of the draft, she's identified some things that we had highlighted as placeholders to be determined that we will sooner or later, or sooner than later, need to determine. And one of those placeholders had to do with fees, local fees.
Additional to the Wetlands Protection Act.
Right. So Wetlands Protection Act only requires filing fees for a notice of intent, and it's based on the type and number of activities, and an abbreviated notice of resource area delineation, the ANRAD, which is what can be used to confirm and kind of lock in resource area boundaries, and that's based on a linear footage determination, capped at like $2,000. Purpose of filing fees under the Wetlands Protection Act is to establish a fund from which the commission can pull to administer the Wetlands Protection Act. It's my understanding. It doesn't cover anything like someone to take minutes, or someone to prepare draft orders, or it might cover that actually, but we're very limited in what we can do and in using it for what we need fees or funding to do. So I've seen some communities have like a flat rate for the other filings, additional fee for an NOI, applying a fee to an RDA, request for certificate of compliance, request for amended order, basically anything that would require administrative action on the commission's part, there's a fee attached to it to supplement the commission's budget. So
what do we have
You need to
currently?
understand that the way that municipal financing works
right, and that's why I'm glad you're
is
here.
that it will go into the general fund. It's not gonna get collected and go into a separate account to only be used by the Conservation Commission. Any fees that are collected by the municipality go into the general fund and then are dispersed at the discretion of the mayor and city council based on department requests. So you may start collecting fees, but there's no guarantee that that money's gonna get set aside to be used for the commission in the future. You can advocate for staff, but there's gonna need to be some tracking system and some determination of if you only collect $500 for the year, that's not gonna pay for a position.
Right.
So it might be worth, if you're going to do that, to establish.
So no, just make a note that fees collected by the Conservation Commission under a local ordinance
Would go into the general fund.
are directed to the municipality's general fund.
Capital
and
G,
not, yeah.
capital F.
Does that run counter to the Wetlands Protection Act?
Yes, absolutely. Wetlands Protection Act fees cannot go into the general fund.
Right, so, but there's special legislation and there's very clear language regarding the fees that are collected under the Wetlands Protection Act under the state.
Right.
But you're creating a local ordinance, so my understanding is unless under the adoption process, there's a discussion regarding money being set aside for a specific account. I don't know if you can even do that or not. I don't know what, I'm not a municipal finance person, but my understanding is all fees that are collected go into the general fund. So the $100,000 that the building department collects in a year goes to the general fund. Any money that we collect goes to the general fund.
So are we saying that the Wetland Protection Act related fees are different than other
Yes,
fees?
it's a separate
Yes.
account.
So which ones are which of these?
These would be local, these would not be state. Wetlands Protection Act is actually state, even though we administer it at the municipal level.
The NOI and the RDA.
So the
and
check is made. So
We're
the
only
check
talking
is
about
yeah.
local fees here.
So the
We're
check
not
for
talking about
this
state fees.
for this stuff, the check, just so you understand, the check is made out to the city.
Mhm.
There's a very specific account number.
Mhm.
We make sure that those funds get directed to that conservation account.
And we do have access to that money, but only specific.
Only under what the general laws allow
Right,
you
yeah,
to
right.
use it for, which is essentially for the administering. So say Melissa was not a professional. Say
Why
none of
do
you
you
were
pay
professional
for-
engineers and you needed to hire a
I see.
consultant to come in for a really complicated project. You could use that funding to hire a consultant
Okay.
to help you review the plans if you didn't have the professional knowledge to be able to do the review yourself. I think typically that's often how it's used in smaller municipalities, is my understanding.
So what are the other fees that we're talking about that go into the general fund?
Those are the local ones.
Such
the local
as?
wetland.
If we established a fee schedule under a wetlands protection
Like an additional
ordinance,
fee.
yes,
In
these would be
addi-
in
okay.
addition to the wetlands
Gotcha.
protection.
So it would be X amount to City of Easthampton
And it will
X
go into
amount
the general fund.
to this.
It would be X amount, City of Easthampton, local ordinance goes to the general fund, versus
Gotcha.
Wetlands Protection
Okay.
Act goes to the conservation account.
And those are set fees somewhere, the amount that goes, is it the same in every town? The state?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, that's
So it's a
established
standard.
in the Wetlands
Okay.
Protection Act.
So we're talking about whether we want to increase that fee.
But we want an additional set of
Yes.
fees at the local level.
Okay.
Yes. So,
If they pay in cash, we can do what we want with it.
establish a cookie fee.
Yeah, pay some chocolate.
No, that's
Do
an
whatever
illegal ad is an
meeting is presented.
expense, and the way we've always done it, because we have no staff to deal with it,
Yeah.
is it's the applicant's responsibility. And therefore, they coordinate directly with the Daily Hampshire Gazette, and they are billed directly by the Daily Hampshire Gazette.
Okay.
So just for a reference, in the planning department, when somebody comes before the ZBA or planning board, we will take care of drafting the legal ad, we'll submit it to the Gazette, but then we invoice the applicant for the cost of the legal ad. We don't pick up that cost, it's not incorporated in their fee. So there's an
Because that's
additional
an
charge.
expense, not a fee.
Right, so there's an additional charge for the legal ad on top of what they're paying for the application fee.
Right.
So is the application fee assumed to cover the administrative cost of
Yes,
doing the legal ad? part?
Exactly, that's what you really need to be thinking about as you set the fee, is what would be the administrative cost to facilitating the application process. For planning and zoning, it's not just their review, we're required by law to send it out to all of the departments and committees for their review, so there's time in transmitting that, there's times in drafting the legal ad, there's a butter notifications, we take care of all of that. So that's what our fees are covering, is our administrative time to do that permit.
So a major difference there also is that under the Wetlands Protection Act, it's the applicant's responsibility or the applicant's representative's responsibility to notify abutters for a notice of intent or other filing that requires that, versus other filings in the municipality where the municipal staff does that.
I'd be curious to know, of those communities that have a local ordinance, how many of them also have professional conservation staff? And how many do not?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've done work in one town where they have a clerical person that takes care of the minutes and, those details, but also they have a consultant that is involved in every single project, and the fee is like, it was
Astronomical.
$7,000 for one project that we had.
That's why he's twitching.
Yeah,
It's
it
not
was
Scarlet Fever.
ridiculous.
And the added benefit was not realized. That's the whole thing. I want this to all work toward benefiting
Yeah.
the Conservation Commission's role and responsibility in the community. So, you know, with our current setup, I mean, I'd rather be advocating for someone, a separate non-commission member to be taking minutes than
Seconded.
Yeah.
not in favor. Then, you know, I don't, the goal of these fees is to offset administrative expenses, not line the coffers.
Yeah.
Right.
And I guess my preference too would be to have the plan in place when we implemented the fees, so that, you know, there wasn't a time where we were getting the fees but not providing the benefit. you know.
Right.
I think what it would be helpful for you to
Yeah,
do is
exactly.
this, because this will have to move through a council process, is it would be helpful to get a sense of how many permits you reviewed in, say, the past 2 years, and then determine what the fee might be, if it was a $50 fee, $100 fee, $150 fee, something like that. And then from there, you can look at that number and you can see whether that would cover the cost of a clerk to take minutes at a minimum.
Mhm.
And if it's large enough, then you can start to advocate for, you know, maybe a part-time position as an agent. So this might be one, you know, the first step is to at least get a clerk to take minutes and to do that. Also know though, just with the clerk, from my own personal experience, is oftentimes these are individuals that have no understanding of how permits work, and it takes several months for them to get into the swing of it, and you could end up spending considerable amount of hours re-editing their work for in the beginning, just to, you know, until they get into the swing of things. So just note that when a clerk shows up, unless they've got experience either taking minutes in working for a commission, that the lingo is going to be off, you know, the details may not be what you're used to, and it might take somebody a couple hours to bring them to where they need to be in line.
Much like now.
Which is fine. I mean, as long as that investment pays off,
Right.
then that's fine.
Right.
But I
And
guess,
then you might train somebody and then they might leave. And then you have to
Maybe-
train
or
somebody
they
else,
may not
because
work out, and then what's the recourse?
What's the recourse? You could just hire somebody else. It's
Okay.
a position, if it's a set position. I mean, we have a clerk that sits under, you know, that works for the planning board, you know. They would have to advertise the position, but she could very well decide that she might want to pick up a couple more hours. I mean, she's working just a couple of hours per month for the city under the planning board. Maybe there could be somebody eventually who starts to sit on multiple boards, and wouldn't that be great if somebody had was sitting on multiple permitting boards and would have the sense of all of the projects. I mean, but
That'd be like an ombudsman. I can't say that word.
no, because the clerks are sort of in the interview process told that they can't say anything. Like their job is to take minutes. They're not part of the board. They're
Right.
not there to deliberate. They're not there to provide
Right.
input.
They're there to report.
basically be quiet and take minutes.
Well, and
So-
I've seen other municipalities, I can think of two right off the top of my head, where there's a dedicated recording clerk for municipal board meetings.
Mm. So the one person's job is basically all the meetings, right? Yeah.
That's my understanding.
Oh, that's one person's job. Is to do it all.
That's one position.
Wow.
Yep.
Do you know how much the clerk for the planning board costs on a?
I'd have to check the files. She's got a raise.
Oh, great.
Too expensive.
I can't remember. Maybe it's around somewhere between $10 and $12 an hour. It's minimum wage.
Are there like other costs on top of the hourly pay?
No pay for travel. We don't. I mean, if she needs a notebook, I'll give her a notebook out of my supply closet. You know. It's,
Yeah, but I mean, like, you know, health
Overhead,
benefits
fringe.
or, you know,
No,
extra
because-
insurance the
No, it's
city has to
not.
pay for having one more
No,
person.
that
working
only
for it or
gets
something.
triggered once somebody works.
Every 2 hours or something.
No, it's I want to say 20 hours a week.
Oh, okay.
Once they hit 20, then they're eligible for benefits, but if they work less
Mhm.
than that, they're not.
So I guess what I would,
Some question mark that one.
well, it's still a question mark, but there are options within a fee structure, and one option is flat fees. So every notice of intent, regardless of size of the project is X amount of dollars, or there's, you know, ranges based on the size of the project, or it could mimic the Wetlands Protection Act categories.
I think it would be easier for admin staff here if there was a flat fee.
Okay.
I don't want to have to work with an applicant to calculate out what their fee is based off a square footage of a whatever it is.
It seems like there's so many variations. Like
There's so many variations, and it would just be easier for staff to say, here's what the fee
$50.
schedule is. It's $50. It's $100, and
Mhm.
you know it can be different. You know the RDA can be less than the NOI.
Mhm.
So you know you can think of it that way. That's how we do it with the planning board.
Mhm.
You know, an A&R plan, which is $50, but a special permit is $100, and with the ZBA it's $150.
Do the clerks help with the administrative things too, or just taking?
No, we do all the administrative
taking
stuff. We
minutes.
do all the agendas. We do the we process the applications. We talk to applicants. That's us.
Mm-hmm.
I would be willing to look through notes from the last 2 years to find how many permits were filed. Would that be the best way to do that?
So you could go to, yeah, that would be great if you would go through the minutes.
So just look at the agendas.
Or the
It'd be easier.
agendas.
Okay. And that's all online, right?
How far back do the agendas go?
Not that far.
I don't know.
I can
I'd have to.
email.
You could at least do the past year, I would think.
Okay, so I can,
And it might be worth noting how many RDAs, how many NOIs.
Okay.
the different types, requests for certificate of compliance, extensions.
What about enforcement orders? That's a tricky one.
That's a tricky one, and that's usually based on the square footage
Of the
of
violation.
the violation, or the number of violations. Should call Palmer,
Okay.
the racetrack.
Oh.
What was their fee or
It was,
penalty or?
one was like $304,500, and then for the most recent thing, it was only like $42,000, only. And that's under their local bylaws.
Wow.
There's some pretty big
That would cover it.
We don't want to have a
They
violation.
have an agent. I don't think we want to wish that on ourselves, so.
So the request for a certificate of compliance is the RDAs, the NOIs.
And Rand,
Did you order condition fees?
no, I
And-
think that's obscene.
And how many are city projects?
Yeah, municipal
No
versus
fees.
private,
Oh.
No
Yeah.
fees.
because municipalities don't pay filing fees.
Okay.
But it's worth noting.
yeah.
Okay. And I can just mark it. I can make
Yeah.
up a spreadsheet.
How much, what is the fee for NOIs and
It depends. Oh, what would we discuss?
what are we currently, what is
It depends on the project and the activity.
the wetlands?
Wetlands
Every-
Protection Act is based on, they have 6 categories.
Oh, okay. So
And then
each one
within
has
each
its own-
category, there are descriptions of various activities.
And each one of those has its own fee?
No, each category has a fee.
Okay. So
When
there's
I'm-
6 kinds of fees.
When I'm budgeting a project and Melissa's not one answering the phone, I usually throw in like $500 or something. But
A lot of
more, just
things fall
slightly
into
more
that.
than half of that goes to the municipality, and slightly less than half of that goes to the state.
So half plus $12.50 goes to the town,
Yeah.
half minus $12.50 goes to the state.
Yeah.
$12.50?
Half.
12%.
So
12%?
So no, stop. No, stop. So a $500 fee, or $750 fee, because this is the one in my head. $362.50 goes to the town, and then the rest of it goes to the state.
And the part that
$362.50 would
goes
go
to-
to the state.
Goes to the
$350
state.
plus $12.50.
Yeah, goes to the.
And the
it's
part that
split it in
goes
half.
to-
No, it
Yeah.
goes to the town. The more goes to the.
Yeah.
No,
Town,
but it's
yeah.
$750. Half of that is
Yeah.
$375.
So whatever. That's not in my head, right? But
But it is, that's the $500 fee.
yeah, plus riverfront area, so $750.
Oh, yeah, I didn't know that one.
Oh, and then if you're in your activities in riverfront area, you add 50% under the state. So like so
I
the
can see why you would think a flat fee.
Yeah, because I don't have the time to
Yeah.
calculate
Do
this out for
full
people.
of
I'm
that,
sorry.
So
You
who
know.
calculates it out when people?
They do it themselves.
they
tell
do it
people to figure
themselves
this
or
out.
their consultant does it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I really tell people you really need to have if you have an NOI, you need to hire a professional. Don't try to do this on your own because it's too complicated and it's too long.
So, just for reference though, someone building a single family house in buffer zone or resource area, any part of which is in buffer zone or resource areas, is a $500 fee for the NOI.
Okay.
So, if any portion of it is in riverfront, like the Briggs Street example from the previous meeting, then the NOI fee for that should have been $750. That's just the way it goes. So,
It might be worth for you, if you're doing research, is to also put together a list, and I feel like this was already done, and maybe it just needs to get updated, but what other municipalities charge?
yeah.
And have get a sense of what our neighbors are charging, what other communities across the valley are charging.
That would be.
I feel like there was an Excel spreadsheet somewhere that already had that, but it might have been old.
Some of that in the report,
Website.
Yeah,
The
that
what?
could be good.
the shared agent report
Maybe.
that BVPC did for us.
I don't know.
Oh, God, I forgot about that.
So Northampton has its own fee structure.
Emerson's on.
Amherst, I don't know about Hadley. South Hadley does, I believe. Holyoke does.
Again, these are all communities that have agents.
Yeah.
Yes, they
So
are.
that would be, it would be worth, if you're doing a spreadsheet or putting it together, the
Yeah.
municipality, what they charge, and whether they have an agent in place,
Mhm.
if they have professional staff.
Yeah, it's funny, but we'll be comparing ourselves to like Southampton and Huntington rather than.
The only other towns without agents. Is it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Rather than.
Well, and that's.
I mean, that could be good
Yeah.
information to have if you want to pitch for an agent and say, here are all the municipalities. Yes, these may be bigger populations. That's the other thing you got to look at. You got to look at the number of people who live in the community. You can't compare a 16,000 population to a 40. It doesn't make sense. But if you can find comparable communities that are in about the same population and around the same square acres, then you have a better case.
I took from that report. I took all the data and I plotted it on a graph and came up with like a regression equation and figured out that our budget should be like $32,000 a year based on that.
That will not happen.
Yeah.
But that would be so nice.
Yes, yeah. We are like tied for the lowest budget conservation commission in the area, and the only other town that has a budget as low as ours is a population of like 1,500 or something like that.
Stop being so efficient. I mean, that's from maybe the city side is we're still able to do everything that we need to do with this budget. So the discussion and the pitch has to be, where are the weaknesses and where do additional resources need to be put in? I've always advocated that we need somebody who's looking at the trail system and the open space and all of those properties and the maintenance and the long-term sustainability of those properties, which is under the commission's jurisdiction, but really an agent should be working on. And then somebody who can go out and do enforcement, because Jay is awesome that he can do it in the middle of the day, but
High five.
Don't touch it.
should be like scarlet fever. But it's Jay.
I mean, I would
But,
argue that it's my experience and frustration in the private sector that compels me to make time to do things in the timely manner that's required by the regulations.
Right.
But that my professional responsibilities are increasingly burdensome.
Right.
And that I do not have
Right. The time.
the time.
Time
Right.
out of your work day.
Right.
The time out of any part of my day.
Right.
I think the problem is that we keep being successful. We'd have to start falling on our faces.
Well, no, I mean, I'm
Some
not saying
measure.
But I
that,
wouldn't
but
want
you
to
have
do
to.
something that
Yeah.
would bring legal action on the city. I mean, I
Yeah.
wouldn't want someone to appeal for lack of timely action.
Right, and we're not gonna,
You
we
know,
being who we are, we're just not gonna let that
That's
happen.
just not going to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
And the fact of the matter is,
Because that's the
if you
equivalent of
guys can't
potential.
do it, then I would be the one that would be doing it.
And why would we want to do that to you?
But that's really where that's essentially probably the backup, is that if you don't have the capacity to do the paperwork anymore, it would fall into our office to take that on. So
Maybe you'll get another person that way.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always thought that, you know, it could be that the assistant planner position is part-time planning department, part-time conservation agent. Because that's only a part-time position right now. She's only a half-time staff. So it could, if the city wanted to, you know, that position, not that necessarily that person, but that position has room to grow to be half and half, which is what Northampton has.
Yeah.
They have somebody who's a land use planner / conservation planner.
And there was a
I
push.
mean, you roll your eyes, but
It's true. It's a difficult balance to maintain.
Right.
For sure.
And there's been discussion in the past of balancing a city engineer position with a conservation agent position, and I think there's too much conflict between
No,
those.
there's
two
way too
positions.
much conflict of interest.
So,
And when push comes to shove, I can imagine one side would lose out more than the other.
right. So, anyway. So I would
Okay.
do some research first and then.
So, more follow-up. But Jessica, I'm gonna email you the past 2 years of agendas, and you're gonna parse out number of applications, type of applicant, fee exempt municipality versus everyone else.
So you want the
Basically.
exact applicant, and then I can just check off municipal or private.
Mhm.
It doesn't. I mean, it can just be just the type of filing, and then the fee, the fee paid, fee exempt.
But that's fine. Oh, I see.
Is that going to be in the minutes?
No,
Only if it's a city one.
you'll just have to.
If
You'll
it's-
start the spreadsheet.
Okay.
So it'll either be, so just note if it's fee exempt or put a TBD.
Okay. Fee exempt is all municipal.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there are no fees for RDAs under the Wetlands Protection Act.
Right, and since money all goes in the general fund, we put, it's not like we charge other municipal departments
No.
fee for,
And
it would
most,
just be.
I've never seen a conservation commission charge a municipality a filing fee under our local bylaw or ordinance. You sometimes
Yeah.
have to you sometimes have to argue that other municipalities filing in their municipality are still fee exempt, or should be.
Mm.
Because sometimes like a treatment plant is in
Mhm.
another town,
Yeah,
but.
so, yeah, I mean, we have a lot of municipal projects, so if we're
Right.
trying to,
That's why I think you need to do the analysis to at
Yeah.
least get a sense of where it would put you.
Moving on.
Moving on.
All right. So next one, Melissa, is buffer zones.
Yeah, they're good.
Yeah, you like them?
Yeah.
Okay. 'Cause I'm a little iffy about this. It's broken down into two sections.
0 to 50, 50 to 100.
Yeah, but the 50 to 100 says non-impervious surfaces, but not limited to driveways, walkways, parking lots, buildings, or structures. So that's the sort of thing, like, do we want to have that? Because I consider that a no-build zone, pretty much.
Great.
Well, yeah, great.
So that's pretty stringent.
That's like the rest of the
So
buffer
I'm
zone.
gonna
So
need
0
a
to
little
20
bit more information here.
That's fine. So
Yeah. What are you talking about?
we're talking about, the line is buffer zone.
Okay.
And then we're talking about what zones within the subzones within the buffer zone we would want to establish, and what activities would be allowed where.
Okay.
And so I think, and maybe, I agree that's, I don't know if that was what I advocated for before, but I would
need
say.
to go, I'm sorry.
Okay,
I'm
feel better.
leaving, this is the budget.
Okay.
This is just the spreadsheet, and then this is what the last expense report has been.
Okay.
They're basically asking for level funding
Okay.
this year, so.
All right.
We have a Conway School of Design meeting tomorrow, is that happening?
If you can be there, that would be
Yeah,
great.
I can be there.
I can't, because I'm gonna be home with
Okay.
my son.
So 11 o'clock?
11 o'clock, my understanding is 2 of the 3 property owners
Okay.
are not interested, so the only one who may show up is Park Hill.
Okay.
Okay, awesome,
Quick
thank you.
question though.
Yeah.
Our postage gets rolled into your postage, which is why it looks like we haven't spent any postage.
Right, because we basically wait until
That's fine.
this
I just
time of
wanted
the
to make
year
sure.
and look where the account is, and if we feel like we need to spend it, we'll put it in, otherwise we'll roll it, so we
Okay.
haven't made that determination yet.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
Okay.
Look out for ashes.
Okay, so, again, I feel like we should back up a little bit because
Yeah.
there are 3 people at the table who are very familiar with other local bylaws in general, and 3 people who are newer to it. 2 people, one,
No, I'm
2
just
and a
saying, I
half.
don't have any idea.
Okay, so right now, with the way the Wetlands Protection Act stands, someone could legally develop, disturb right up to the resource area boundary, provided they make the case that they're not going to have, that development is not going to have an adverse effect on the resource area. No one quite believes that, but, so the benefit of establishing restrictions on buffer zone under a local ordinance are that you could say something like 0 disturbance from 0 to 25 feet. 25 feet is like, is this room even 25 feet?
25 feet,
You know, I don't know. So, you know, you could require an undisturbed buffer from 0 to 25 feet. And then limit, this is just an example, limit the type of activity that could occur from 25 to 50 feet. And then, again, have, you know, activities that are allowed. So from, 0 to 25, nothing, no disturbance. 25 to 50, limited vegetation removal and grading. 50 to 100, structures and other impervious area, something like that.
But I think the tradition in Easthampton, going back to the old bylaw, was
0 to 50.
no structures within 0 to 50, or no work within 0 to 50.
Just said no, like undisturbed.
Undisturbed.
Nothing.
I think that was it, and that's, I mean, I would be fine with that, but that's
Yeah.
also pretty,
It's pretty strict. So.
I mean, what I'm almost thinking, and this just occurred to me, is maybe there's different parts of town where it makes sense for different buffers, based on how densely developed they are and what the city's plans for them are,
or
based on like that map.
that
Yeah.
would be an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, but I mean,
Pretty difficult.
Then I nominate Dan Buttrick to figure it out.
well, it just
I hear what you're saying.
like if we were like, if this city was like, and I'm not even going to say Holyoke or Springfield, I'm going to say like Lowell or Lawrence, that are like 100% super built
Right.
up, like who cares how close you build to the wetland, in places that are super urbanized already, like 100%, but we have little patches that are like that, and we also have densely developed, residential and commercial areas, where it may not be practicable to stay that far away from. I mean, there's a lot of quarter acre zoning areas where, depending on what you do with your buffer, you might make, people unable to do things,
So,
But then there's other parts that are really agricultural and rural, where having a big buffer, would just be like looking way down the line, against
So it
something.
would almost be
happening.
dependent on what you want to do.
or
Yeah.
what if we differentiated between new development and redevelopment?
Mhm.
And for redevelopment, so for new development, it's not exactly what you were going for, but new development would have the set zones,
Yeah.
and then redevelopment would be no closer than, or, X%,
Yeah.
no increase greater than X%, or something.
But so I agree with that, but I also think that like infill development is something that makes sense, because if there's an undeveloped parcel, in a super high developed area, then in my mind it makes sense for development to happen where development already is, But I don't know how to do that. in a wetlands
I'm just trying
ordinance.
to think of, I mean, I like that idea, I'm just trying to think of how it could be implemented without creating,
I mean, there is bylaw. There's like the Wetlands Protection Act to do with canals and like specific rivers,
Yeah.
like in cities. And
well, yeah,
dense
Springfield has a
areas.
25-foot riverfront area
And so
per,
it's whatever.
per the Wetlands Protection Act. So the entire city of Springfield doesn't have to deal with 200-foot riverfront area, it's just a 25-foot riverfront area because of historical development along so much of the river, or rivers.
Can you tie, probably a wetland protection act or wetland protection ordinance in Massachusetts has not been tied to a zoning ordinance.
It's a non-zoning ordinance,
Yeah.
actually.
So it's by
So
definition.
to link the two would be potentially problematic.
All right. Well, we're just spitballing here.
Well, we are,
I
and,
mean, that's what I
and,
need
and,
to.
and, you know, there's always a waiver potential
Variance.
where a case for hardship could be made.
I don't like waivers.
I don't either, but they can be tied to offsetting mitigation.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's not terribly sympathetic, but if someone were to brand new right out of the gate purchase a property because they don't understand various restrictions, you know, if they don't, you know, there are zoning restrictions, they can go to the ZBA for whatever it's called, special permit?
Variance or?
Variance.
Mhm.
And, you know, there's a mechanism by which they can make the case that they should be able to do what they can do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see why wetlands should be any different. You know, if you get this great deal on a beautiful piece of land, only to find out you can't build on it because it's floodplain, that's not the Wetlands Protection Act's fault. You know, that's an individual who didn't do their research before making a significant investment. You know,
Yeah, but
there's only so much that should be done.
the nice thing about the Wetlands Protection Act is it doesn't give, you know, there's no variance or waiver options, but
There are
there's-
standards you have to meet.
There are standards and there's mitigation, you
Mhm.
know, that you do.
So performance standards for buffer zone?
So it's much easier to administer than have somebody come up and say, you know, I think I should get a waiver, you know, and then you're like, oh, okay, you know, and you don't want
So-
to, but you do anyways because you just did to somebody else or something.
Well, and that's true. So waivers are, in my mind, a variance should be granted stringently. So what if we instead talked about performance standards for buffer zone?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Do we still want to keep the original 0 to 50 that they have in?
I think we need to talk about within that. I would still like to keep a no disturbance zone and then have a performance standard. I don't think there's much, if any, reason to work within 25 feet of a vegetated wetland or an inland stream
For new development,
for new development,
if you're not putting in a stream crossing for a driveway.
which would have a limited project provision that would allow it.
25 feet? 0 to 25?
We're just talking, but yeah.
We're just spitballing here.
I'm suggesting to lower the standard.
Well, has it been a problem, the 0 to 50 no disturbance?
Well,
Yeah, look at Paul Street.
yeah, it happens a lot where, you know, I mean, so Paul Street's a case where, you know, they put in a lot of little lots in, you know, I forget what the acreage was, 4.5 acres of a 27-acre parcel, and then gave, you know.
To be fair, much of that 27 acres was undevelopable because of wetlands and floodplain and riverfront
Right,
and rare
right.
species.
Yeah, exactly.
So they donated that extra, is that what you were doing?
Or
Right?
They sold it to the land
to
trust,
the
and then now we hold the conservation restriction on it. But then that's a special type of subdivision too, where because of that's what they were doing, they allowed the lots to be smaller than they otherwise would have to have been per zoning. And you know,
And I mean, in my opinion, you know, that was a good use of that, you know, and I forget how close those houses are to the wetlands. Some of them are, a couple of them are fairly close.
I think the yard limit is at 50.
Is it? Yeah.
But I want to put in that topography made that possible too, or encouraged that.
Right.
Because steep slope dropped off, and
Right.
they basically couldn't make it yard that would be a desirable
Yeah.
flat yard.
So the yard limit
fine.
is basically 50 feet from the,
Essentially, the stream,
not the house limit, but the yard
Exactly.
limit.
the yard
Yeah.
limit, the limit of
She
disturbance.
fenced only that part.
She did
She
it at
knew
her
her
limit of lawn.
boundaries.
Oh, she
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess, you know,
Seriously.
It happened.
I mean, I want to say it was the backs of the houses that they were working to keep 50 feet away from the wetlands.
Maybe
But
it
then,
was.
But then they wanted their
we-
porches.
But then we're fighting
Little back
deck
decks.
encroachments on
Right.
that, and then we've got, you know, nothing really to do.
Right, to prevent.
Yeah, you know, and I guess that's my issue, you know. I mean, 25 feet of a no disturb zone makes sense in my mind, with limited project provisions, and then another, you know, another distance of some sort or another that's, you know,
You could
No
do
structures.
Yeah.
yeah,
Couldn't have structures.
Right.
So you said, so like yard, you could
Yeah.
do yard, 25 feet.
But not parking lots.
But not
Impervious surfaces.
Driveways.
Are there regulations on chemicals you can use in your yard?
No, not unless we impose. So for Paul Street, we said no calcium chloride.
yeah. But I mean, even in the existing houses, we can't do that anyways because we're in an aquifer protection area.
Right.
Not to say that everybody doesn't, but
Well, I mean, and that gets into a whole different realm of education and outreach, and you know.
yeah. But I mean, I'm assuming we'll continue to put those kinds of things in each permit as they come up. But if we were having an ordinance, then we would be saying, you know, you can't do this within this distance of wetlands anywhere in town. Which actually is probably just about the case anyways, because the aquifer protection area is everywhere.
Yeah, depending on where you live, you might have to use like organic fertilizers as opposed to whatever. If we were
Yeah.
to say something like that.
I have a feeling that has zero enforcement.
Yeah.
And that's all.
I mean,
that's all based on awareness,
Yeah.
individual awareness, and inclination toward that sort of activity.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which is not, I mean, it's just a realistic approach. So where are we?
Does it make sense to just, I mean, it sounds like there's gonna be waivers and conditions on
I
pretty
think
much
there
anything.
has to be a waiver provision.
Which
You-
there is one. There is a
Yeah.
variance one already.
Yeah, and I don't think you can prepare something like this without having that in there.
So does it make sense to just leave it and assume that there's gonna be?
Well, but then that gets into how frequently do you want to be making, do you want there to be an argument for a waiver? You know?
I mean, so what's the purpose for a waiver, though?
To get
Well, if
people
you-
out of it.
No, I mean, well, if a waiver were to be granted, it has, that impact has to be offset somehow by some other form of mitigation.
Oh. So you're allowed to do it, but you have to
Compensate.
Yeah.
compensate.
Mm-hmm.
Like what do they call them? Mitigation bank.
Environmentally beneficial project.
An environmental beneficial project.
Or, so if you want to develop, then you have to do invasive species management in perpetuity or something of that nature. Or if you want, you have to, that's where it would be helpful to be like, well, you can develop 27% of buffer zone. as impervious, and everything else has to be impervious. No,
Opposite.
backwards, reverse that, I'm getting tired. But you can develop, and then the rest of it has to be natural, or something like that.
So that would be a square footage measurement
Yeah.
versus
So that
a
way it would be-
buffers versus
Yeah,
distance from the buffer zone. You could do this section.
you can pick and choose where
Right.
you do your development up to a certain point.
You could almost encourage green building as well. You're able to do
LID
that.
stuff, yeah. You can put your rain garden in the buffer zone.
Still don't make one of those.
At your house?
Yeah, keep saying every year, I'm like, oh, I gotta do a rain garden,
And then life.
and then life.
Okay.
So no definite answers now either. It sounds like if we have a standard like 0 to 25, we also have to have a variance section,
Mhm.
and then write up something in there as well.
So we have to figure out what performance standards we want there to be for buffer zone, or how we want to. I mean, do you want to take a stab at? I don't even know how. I can't, just initially figure out how I would even begin to craft a section on buffer zone standards based on lot size and density of surrounding development.
Yeah, I mean,
So that would fall to you. I mean,
it's bright ideas like that have caused this to go on for 7 years.
So performance standards are. Can you give me an example?
the criteria you have to meet.
Such as.
So for impacting a bordering vegetated
Yep.
wetland, you have to provide at least that same square area as a replicated wetland,
Yep.
as a constructed
Yeah.
wetland.
Okay. With some number of species or local species or this is whatever. Okay. So if we already have a 50-foot.
We don't really have a 50
Oh.
foot. We don't have anything because we have the Wetlands Protection Act. So we don't have anything more stringent than the Wetlands Protection Act.
Yeah, the 50-foot thing is a tradition.
It's a relic.
It's a relic that is, being eroded, has been eroded.
Yeah.
Because I was going to say, okay, great.
It was honored for a while.
So 0 to 25 and then 25 to 50.
So I mean,
I feel like we have to pick something.
I like the idea of 0 to 25, no disturbance.
Yeah.
Except for limited projects. And then 25 to 50, no structures. No occupied structures. No, I wouldn't want like a 4-car garage going in the 50-foot buffer.
Especially if I have a
Nothing you need a building permit for.
Oh, there you go. So basically some sheds.
Yeah, like a small shed or whatever, who cares, it's not gonna hurt anything.
Like a shed that's below the footprint and height requirements.
Yeah,
But so there's also, it seems like there's no ground disturbance still between 0 to 50. It's just.
Well, they could do grading.
Oh.
They could do vegetation removal. So if you have a wooded or otherwise vegetated lot, you could establish your lawn up to.
what about swimming pools?
Permit. So you need a permit to get built a swimming pool?
Building permit.
I have no idea.
I would
But not in
imagine.
a above.
I don't know.
Mm.
I don't know.
So
Then you've got to deal with discharge water.
25 to 50 feet allow, in that zone, we would allow grading, vegetation removal, but no structures requiring a permit.
I know how to deal with it. Just plug, there it goes down the well.
So far it says components of stormwater management systems, landscaping, grading, and erosion control can be allowed in the 50 to 100, but would be 25 to 50. Does that satisfy?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
And we can.
So when was that list again now?
It's like landscaping, erosion control, stormwater management.
Okay. Yeah.
Should I put that in? So
Yeah.
Landscaping.
So it's
Scapeting.
Landscaping, grading, stormwater management.
Stormwater?
Yeah,
storm-
that too.
and erosion control.
Techno structures.
So with grading in that zone, are there conditions on that? Like they need to have erosion control barriers, or they can just?
Well, basically, any project is going to have an erosion.
Okay.
But
That's just
a good
understood.
question. Yeah. Right there.
So
Okay.
I have to be home by 7:50.
Why?
Do you really want to know?
Mm.
Or is this a phone call? This is a phone call for Kate.
That's just in random time.
Oh, no,
It's not random.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So replacement areas and resource areas that we want to protect. Written, it's already, there's isolated wetlands and vernal pools.
Yeah, we should
Yeah,
protect those.
those absolutely. And
Yeah.
I think a vernal pool, a certified vernal pool has to have no disturbance in the buffer zone. So 100-foot, no disturbance.
So these should
Around
be
the vernal pool envelope.
Yeah, at least.
Right.
Unless there's a corridor, if there's an identified corridor between the vernal pool and something else, then
It's a corridor.
100 feet away from
Not
that
a
whole
corridor.
goddamn corridor. Sorry for the people at home.
The two people watching this in my phone.
Hey, somebody the other day was like, "Hey, I recognize you from public access TV."
You're famous.
Hi, John.
That's awesome.
Can we pause just for one moment? Isolated wetland and certified vernal pool should be added to the list of
Protected resource areas.
Yeah.
Thank you. Protected.
So
resource
for
areas.
isolated vegetated wetlands, IVW, do we want to establish a minimum size?
There's a 400-foot. It's already there. 400 square feet.
Really?
Yeah.
That's 20 by 20, right?
Small. 20 by 20. Can you imagine?
That would have been
So,
my
can you
backyard
imagine
last
being
weekend.
tasked
No,
with
that, wait, does it count? I don't think it counts.
not in a yard, in an established, it would be grandfathered, but can you imagine being tasked with delineating a 50-acre parcel and having to find everything 20 square feet or larger?
That's ridiculous.
I mean, I think 400 square feet can't, well, I mean, that's just a random example, but
Yeah. It's stopping and having, yeah.
I mean, you'd have to establish the tightest grid. It would take, I think we need to come up with,
How big was that?
So so it says there's
One.
400 square feet counts if it's a certified vernal pool already. Then if it's 50,
I think if it's a certified vernal pool, it doesn't matter.
okay.
If
So it
it's
doesn't matter the size.
if it's a vernal pool habitat, I think we need to keep isolated vegetated wetlands separate from vernal pools.
Okay, good. Because they're together right now.
They need to be torn asunder.
Okay.
Torn asunder.
Yeah.
The one thing I never understood about vernal pools is, like, so you have this GIS map and there are these dots, right? And
Mhm.
sometimes they're like,
Enormous. Oh, sorry, no.
I'm
Sorry.
Like the dot. I mean, it's a symbol.
yeah, it's
So
a
it
symbol,
doesn't
right.
capture the
Yeah.
boundary of the vernal pool depression.
Right, and sometimes it's not even like in the vernal pool, so it's like, what are we looking at here, you know?
Because the people who do it don't provide
Yeah.
us data.
So, how do you, like, if someone's coming to us and saying, you know, there's a vernal pool around, there's a dot right here, you know, here's the one wetland, there's the dot, you know, well, like,
I mean, chances are pretty good that that dot's supposed to be in that wetland.
yeah, but how do you,
You call natural heritage.
okay,
You probably
They
need
So
to
that's
do all
not-
of that.
They keep all the data.
so that's not a problem.
Yeah.
No, that's
Okay.
not a problem. But I think we need. I think it would be good to differentiate between certified vernal pools and vernal pool habitat.
Can
How
we
do you-
capitalize on these?
Yep.
Yes.
There's a lot of species listed
Yeah.
already in the.
Okay.
How do you document vernal pool habitat, or what is vernal pool habitat?
So, vernal pool habitat could be it's just not certified, or it could be, may not have the, oh God, words. Doesn't have the right hydro period, but it still can function as a vernal pool
Mm-hmm.
for some species.
It still takes a lot of effort to figure that out. Right?
Hydro what?
Hydro period. The amount of time it's wet.
I knew
Don't
that.
use a hydro comma by accident.
Semicolon.
And then, there also is isolated land subject to flooding. ILSF as opposed to BLSF. And that in the Wetlands Protection Act has criteria about inlet, outlet, and volume. 1/4 acre foot to an average depth of 6 inches is what the Wetlands Protection Act.
Based on outlet.
Inlet, no inlet, no outlet. It's basically a lettuce spot.
Like my yard.
Your yard floods,
We have a lot of pools out there.
and then it drains.
And then it drains.
So having 3 different sections for those. is-
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, do we want to have a more? Well, I guess the question about ILSF is: do we want to put a buffer zone on it as well? Do we want to put a buffer zone on isolated vegetated wetland, which I think we should?
On which one?
IVW
IBW, yes.
and ILSF.
And also a size thing on
We
the.
need, we need to come to a consensus on size, minimum size.
So there's no buffer on BLSF now, on
Correct.
the Wetland Protection Act, bordering lands subject to flooding.
100-year floodplain.
Okay.
And
We're losing Ashley in like 2 minutes here.
5. I can give you 5.
when does, like, so an ILSF, remind me how big, like it could be
It could be
infinitely big, and as long as if it
as long
wasn't
as it
connected
hold-
to anything.
and holds water to an average depth of 6 inches. So, if it's just a pancake flat field that,
Mhm.
water ponds it an inch or 2 in after a rain event and then that dissipates, that's not ILSF because it has met the 6-inch criteria.
Yeah, so what's the other criteria?
1/4 acre foot.
1/4 acre foot. All right.
It is,
What, does it have buffer if it
does not.
does not have buffer?
Land subject to flooding and the Wetlands Protection Act does not have a buffer.
No, but I mean, I'm talking about vegetated wetlands that are isolated.
They do not have they're not even jurisdictional under the Wetlands Protection
So
Act.
that's what I'm asking. If you had one of these isolated wetlands that was infinitely large in size,
Oh.
but just wasn't connected to anything, it would have no buffer, no protection.
I think it should have a buffer.
But no, right now it doesn't. Right now it's
Correct.
not protected.
Right.
So
the
if there's
land
no,
around it is not protected.
if there's a huge wetland with no channel coming into or going out of it, then it has no protection.
The easiest way to do it is just put it under the same wetlands as
So just
the
have
watering
vegetated wetlands.
borderline. Yeah.
And just have it be vegetated wetlands.
Yeah.
Not
Not like to list it
versus-
as like we would count it as the same
Okay.
ways of like doing buffer zones as regular wetlands.
So except, yes, I agree.
Yeah. If
But
you
then
want
we
to
have
do
to
that.
come up with a size criteria.
Yeah.
True.
Because again, something the size of this table may meet all the criteria to be considered a vegetated wetland,
Bless you.
but the functions and values of something the size of this table are questionable.
Scarlet fever symptoms because she's sneezing.
That's not a symptom.
Feeling rashy day. Everything itches. So yeah, I'm an advocate for buffer zone on lots of things.
Yeah.
Including land subject to flooding. Because if you increase, so say you have bordering land subject to flooding, and you increase the runoff the rate of runoff contributing to it during a storm event. Doesn't that theoretically exacerbate flooding?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe not 100-foot buffer zone, but a 25-foot? And floodplain has wildlife habitat functions and values that probably more critical than upland buffer zone.
When you say put a buffer zone on that, do you mean like a strict no disturb, or do you mean just have a buffer zone saying that people should be aware of it?
I don't know.
Isn't in Bedford? Isn't in Bedford the 100-year floodplain a resource area basically that's protected, like like it was BBW?
Well, I mean that's basically what it is now. I mean BLSF is 100-year floodplain.
Well, right, but you can build in it if you provide mitigation.
Yeah, you can build in a wetland if you provide
Right.
mitigation.
Yeah.
Bedford's not the
Maybe. Yeah.
model county.
Maybe not. It's been a long time. It's been a long time.
Okay.
So,
We need to go.
I move that we continue this.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Second.
So hopefully that's enough
All
to
in favor?
days.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Yeah.
So I need to email you stuff. You're going to start a table. Bring the table to our next meeting.
This one's no longer sufficient. We'll
We'll set everything up right now.
We can't do the meeting minutes because they have not been circulated.
Okay. So we'll.
So do I just take that off the thing here?
No, I make a
Yeah.
note that we.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So meeting minutes for January were not reviewed?
We're not discussed or approved. So then, I guess very quickly,
To
can someone
continue
else
the meeting
continue
minutes.
taking minutes since Ashley has to go and we need to talk about the budget?
Oh, shoot.
I
All
can
right.
do it.
Save, open it back up.
It's not close.
Okay.
I'll write up a couple things about this, by the way. Send it to everyone.
Budget people.
So my Google Docs is open. Can you save it into Google Docs when you're done?
Sure can.
Thanks.
And I'll take your email.
Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah, can you answer them all, please?
Ignore those for Melissa.
Problem solved.
Boop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doop-boop. Ba-dum-bum-bum-bum.
So you do this in a Google Drive?
Actually, that's what she started doing, which
Personal.
is great.
One, because then I could just share it with Melissa, and then I knew they would be here. I didn't have to
Get it back.
Can you do that with the file? Okay, good. Because I was going to suggest
I think
that.
we can.
I don't know if it's like an open meeting, something. Is that bad to be talking about bylaws?
Let's
stuff?
hold off until we can confirm with Jessica.
Okay.
But I would think that just,
Maybe if we don't like converse, we just like
Yeah.
put our
yeah, here they are, because that's
Choose
no
stuff
different
in.
than email, right?
But that could be a form of deliberation if you see someone else's edits and put your own in.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So
I didn't know we
that's-
were gonna make edits too.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Ashley. We'll
Ashley.
see you soon.
Okay.
Budget.
Yeah, so, I don't know, Jessica said that everything's gonna be level funded probably, but we, are spending more on our dues and membership than budgeted. That's obviously something everybody should be a member
Yeah,
of the,
and we don't have any
MACC.
control over that.
Right, exactly. Our budget for office supplies and postage is $200, and it sounds like we probably use that amount, if not more.
I should ask Jessica.
Do certificates
Of
of
services.
You said we're
No, because
spending
we
more
need,
on our
we need
dues
to
and
know when they
membership
receive it.
Yeah.
than
For
in
certain
prior
things.
years, or
Then
Or
budgeted. Yeah, I'm assuming the dues went up a little bit or something. Purchase of services. What did we do?
How much was it?
There's $393 expended.
and I can't remember.
Did we purchase any services?
Did we buy some big book thing? Online book?
We did,
Subscription
the
thing?
MACC.
Maybe what it was.
Handbook. But that wouldn't have been that much.
No.
I don't think.
I think it could be.
It shouldn't be.
It was for the year 2015.
It occurred in 2015.
Was there something that?
Do you need a pen?
Yeah.
God damn it.
Is it that little flash drive that went around?
Oh, I hope not.
I
That
have
wasn't
that.
something that got paid for, right? That was a free service.
Yeah, I thought someone just mailed it to us now.
Did the PVPC did? Wasn't there
Oh,
something
they
that
did maps.
Maps. No, those would have been free, but actually,
I thought we had to pay for something. Oh no, that was
That was
part
the-
of our
the-
free thing.
Um,
The agent thing. No.
no.
Stop looking at me like that.
The Conway School of
Landscape design.
yeah, that project. We have to pay. We have to pay for that
From last year?
for this year.
For maps?
I'm looking at this year's. I think this must be
The Trails project.
the Trails project.
And that's already reflected in our budget.
Probably.
Okay.
Because that's probably what this is.
All right.
Yeah, that's my. I can ask Jessica.
I don't want that pen back now, Jeremy.
Sorry, whose
I'm
pen is
not
this?
sure
Did you say
it's
that was-
yours.
Yours now.
I owe you a pen.
Just wait till you're not on quarantine.
Let me see that computer say.
Hey, that's a nice tablet, Jay.
I'll throw it in the microwave.
All right.
Okay.
So I think we should ask for a little bit more money at least, and we don't. I mean, if we wanted to go to MACC,
So
we don't have any money for that.
right. I don't think we're gonna get if we ask.
Yeah, but we should ask anyways.
Okay. So
That's how this works, right?
Yes.
Yeah. We should ask.
So
We should ask for like $35,000
Yeah, knock 'em
and just
off the
just
tree.
start doing it every year. Yeah.
I don't think we'll look like team players.
I'm definitely gonna ask why, but
I don't think Jessica will put that forward, actually.
Yeah,
But
probably not.
I mean, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
That you
So-
certainly won't get it if you don't ask for it.
Right.
But I also think we need
Not
to
gonna
be.
get it anyways.
I think there are things that we can look at, which is, and actually the number of applications in the past 2 years directly relates to our correspondence and our use of postage, and theoretically, if an applicant isn't here to receive, we are obligated to issue, but they're not obligated to pick up. So maybe we just say everyone has to pick their stuff up.
what are you talking about? Thinking about
Certified mail.
Oh, okay.
So, most people are local and are willing to wait while we sign and copy and give them their original copy. But if they're not, then sometimes we have to send it. And if we send it, we have to send it certified mail so that we have proof. We can track, certificates of mail is great for butter notifications
Mhm.
because you only have to prove that you send them. But if you need to demonstrate that something was delivered, I don't think you can track a certificate of mail that way.
Yeah.
So in 2014, our actual expenditures were $485.55, and that included $374 of dues. So the dues went up $11 for 2015. Our postage budget actually for 20. Oh no. Okay, so actually dues, 2014, 37.4, 2015, 385, 2016, 385.
Dues?
The dues are level.
Yeah, so dues were level this past year, but they went up from 2014. Our
Wait, can I take a step back? What are the dues for?
MACC, Mass Association of
What's that?
Conservation
That's it.
Commissioners. Yeah,
That's all we get.
But then we don't even get to go to the conference.
yeah.
Because that's in addition, there's a fee for that in
Yeah.
addition to.
You get a discount because you're a member, but you still have to pay to go, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So what was the 485.55? That was the dues in total?
No, that was
That was our total,
total budget.
expenditure in 2014.
What was our total budget?
In which
2014.
I can't see that. I don't have that. So postage, our postage is actually $200 for 2016, and it was $100 2015 and $50 in 2014. So that number has actually gone up a lot. I think probably because we've had a discussion with Jessica about postage in the past.
Yeah, and I think Stuart, when Stuart was the planner, he just didn't bother differentiating.
Right.
Yeah.
So he would send things out certified mail, but it would come out of the planning department budget.
Yeah. But I think what Jessica does is she just takes our whole budget at the end of the year and rolls it into yeah. I don't know. So I guess we'll need to find out from her if she thinks that's still not enough, or if we should just leave it where it is. But I do think we should ask for more for dues in case that goes up.
You're saying if the postage, find out from her if postage budget is still not enough?
Yeah. And the amount of time we spent thinking about this multiplied by all of our billing rates is far greater than the amount of money that we're asking for.
We are volunteers. Seriously.
Maybe $7,000 every time we review an application.
Yeah, what's our... if we were billing out for these meetings, what would that cost? You're probably a solid $250 an hour at least, Jay. Huh?
Definitely.
And worth every penny that you charge us. What? Teachers are worth very little. Way more.
I know.
Don't do that math. Don't do the math.
You can't.
You'll cry.
Yeah, exactly.
The Valley Bond is incredible.
It's the love, man. Can they pay us back all the love?
That's what they say about parenting too.
Really. It's little to see at the end of the day.
Okay,
I don't
back
know how
on
many
track.
times I heard, no, I don't want you, I want Mama today.
Oh.
This is Scarlet Fever talking.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, she'll be blind.
Yeah.
All right. So, are you moving that we ask for more money?
I think we're going to ask Jessica if
Yeah.
if the postage budget is sufficient based on previous years, and then when did the MACC dues get paid?
I don't know.
I mean, if they've raised them, they should raise them. And then what does it cost to attend the MACC? Do you have that?
I don't think we're going to get that.
I think so.
Because that's very soon.
Well, it would be for next year. Yeah. But if they're trying to level fund anything, I could see making the case for another $8 for dues.
Member 115.
So, wow. Yeah, so
We would have to tell her why we want the dues or the bigger budget. And if we
For a
said we're going to
25%
this,
increase in budget so that one person could go to a
That'd be like
conference.
I mean, so
One time a year.
In Worcester.
well, College of the Holy Cross. I drive there with my eyes shut. Should I put that in? Huh?
Should I put that in?
No.
Didn't we all go to something one year? Like we all piled into a car, and you either went to Pittsfield or Worcester.
Peter and I drove out to Pittsfield together.
You and Peter.
And I got a migraine, and he had to drive my car on the way back.
Yeah,
I
that
was
was
ill.
that was the year before. But then the next year, I feel like the three of us at least
Maybe.
went someplace to Pittsfield, maybe,
Maybe.
or Worcester.
It was the hotel there. It was the Crown Point,
Yeah.
Crown Plaza Point.
Something
It's a
like
tall
that.
building in Pittsfield.
What was it for?
It was MACC.
Yeah, an MACC like fall.
It was like the
regional.
fall, and then they started doing it at the Clarion Hotel in Northampton,
Oh wow.
which is no longer. they have it somewhere different this year. Or last year they did.
Well, they're gonna demo that building, so.
Melissa, that was like a decade ago.
Thanks. Moving on.
Okay, so what, we have questions for Jessica.
Mhm.
Okay, so we
Right.
need to find out what those answers are. So our preference would be to increase the dues accordingly
Yeah.
to MACC rates.
To cover it, yeah,
Yeah.
just to cover it.
Ideally, we would have an education budget
Yeah.
of $250 to cover 2 people going to the MACC conference.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
We'll compromise at none. I mean, one.
But realistically, I mean, we have. I mean, there are. I mean, you have the. Sorry, I'm stealing. So MHCC has the fundamentals for conservation commissions, and they include. So the units that they're teaching at this conference in March. Wetland functions and values, or protecting wild. You could attend that, or protecting wildlife habitat, and then you could take either running an effective meeting. Maybe I should, or effective erosion and sediment control, and
Which I'm honestly probably just might go to one of those anyways.
yeah, I mean,
But that's not through here.
but then, or you could attend workshops about lots of other things like culvert replacement implementation and protecting vernal pools, or no, we're not going to do right sizing monitoring for stream barrier removal projects.
Sounds
Timely.
sounds timely.
Green infrastructure, biodiversity through conservation planning, culvert assessment.
So now that we have a commission with excited new members that may not have had as much professional exposure to wetlands protection as the rest of us, it would be good to have the ability to send people.
Right.
Yeah, I would want to go.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that would be ideal.
Okay. Sounds good.
So you'll ask Jessica those questions and
Yep.
Alan? Okay. All right, what else? All right. So our next meeting is February 8th. See you then?
Great, bye.
February.
February?
All right, motion to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn?
No.
I motion to adjourn.
Look, not all of us have to go home to the germ ward.
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
Ooh, nice.